What's going on, y'all? KMBest here. Let's take a look at the best decks to climb in Marvel Snap. It's no surprise that we're starting with a Thanos Fractured Frontier list. In fact, we're going to start by looking at three of them. The card is extremely popular, but I do think that its popularity is a little bit outsized compared to how good it is, which is not to say that it's not a very good card. It is, but it's also a card that lends itself to some very specific deck building restrictions that right now people are opting into to explore what his potential is, and that's not necessarily the same thing as the metagame is always going to be 50% Thanos Fractured Frontier decks. I think that it's starting to become a little bit more clear that there are some shells that are particularly good at utilizing him and some shells that are a little bit less good at utilizing him, such that maybe they want to be trying to do something else. I don't think a lot of people are aware of this version of the Aurora list that was cooked up by Honifer, and I've been playing incredibly successfully in High Infinite so far. This is a list that has a ton of really interesting play to it, but fundamentally what it's really trying to do here is add a super nut draw into an Aurora deck. What you're looking for is the red stone and the blue stone on Thanos. Then you play them on Wong, get whatever you're looking for additionally in terms of other stones that happen to come out of Thanos, and you'll end up with 3 Wongs and a movable Thanos. That is a very powerful thing to do because then you play Aurora on your lane with 3 Wongs. That's a pretty strong thing. Oh, by the way, this is still just a very good Aurora deck because when Thanos isn't doing that, he's making Thing First Steps look positively tiny. This is a really powerful list that does a lot of the work for you in terms of what Thanos is able to bring to the table. Make sure that you're getting as much value out of your Thanos as possible by using him with things like this. The other version of Thanos that I particularly respect right now is the TOV Wilson Fisk Kraglin version of the deck. And I think a lot of what I respect about this list is that it is good both with and without Thanos in the play of how the deck tends to play out. This is a deck that can win games when you are not Thanosing. It is a deck that is consistently able to make Thanos happen with a large amount of loaded bullets. It's got an extremely low curve, a lot of ability to get things into the deck that are easy to top deck out of. Both Surge and Shadowlands Daredevil make your top decks easier to weave into your curve. There are very few situations where after turn 3 you are ever playing anything other than the card off the top of your deck, and that is really solid for a Thanos list. You also have the King A-Tree, Shadowlands Daredevil stuff, which to be honest is a little suspect to me right now. I have enjoyed the Shadowlands Daredevil stuff, but it is not clear to me that it is worth the games where it means that I don't draw my Thanos. That said, this is an excellent points package with an excellent new card. You have amazing targets for Thanos's clone, leaving things like a version of Shadowlands Daredevil alone in a lane, protecting that stuff with Sam Wilson's shield from opposing Thanoses and or cloning it with your Thanos. All of that stuff is excellent. Cloning a Kraglin means that you'll get the on reveal again. A lot of power here for Thanos, a lot of strength, and a lot of low curve ways of doing it. Batroc is where things start to get a little fuzzy. I've seen a ton of people playing this list. Dara tweeted it. I saw Chamo playing it. I'm not incredibly sold on it. I think Thanos in Batroc is closer to a lateral move than many might argue. You are actually losing some real stuff here. Like, in order to fit Thanos in Batroc, you are costing yourself Iska, you are costing yourself Hellion, you are costing yourself cards you actually do kind of care about, you're costing yourself Juggernaut. Like, those are good cards. And that's not to say Thanos isn't, but I definitely consider this and a non-Batroc Thanos deck to be, if not very close together, maybe even in favor of, I should say, a non-Thanos Batroc deck. And I think that that is sort of the inflection point. There are a lot of other decks right now, but these three are the Thanos decks that I feel like are maybe actually using him well. And then there's a lot of decks where it's like Thanos Wiccan or something like that. And to be clear, those decks, not Thanos's fault. That's a Wiccan issue. Like, he's just not good enough to make that archetype better in comparison to him being in these other archetypes. Like, it just isn't going to happen. There's some Thanos stuff, which I think is interesting, but I haven't been fully sold on yet. And so you really get like these three as the Thanos archetypes that I actually seriously respect and play against a lot. And I'm like, okay, that's legit. And then the other two Thanos archetypes are kind of around and I'm not actually sure. But Batrock's definitely the inflection point because I'm not 100% convinced that Thanos is better than the other version of Batrock. Which, for those who may have forgotten, looks like this and is kind of unbelievably good. Derek is playing this list right now. It is extremely, extremely powerful. And if you asked him, he'd tell you that he thinks this is just straight up better than the Thanos version. A lot of it is down to just the fact that Iska is a really powerful card. Being able to be a Juggernaut Hellion deck is an incredibly powerful tool in the hands of an experienced player. My best guess is that at the very top end of ladder, this is probably a better deck, but for most people, Thanos' simplicity and power will make that deck a little bit better of a choice. This is definitely not a deck that people should be sleeping on, though, and I do think that it is very much still up in the air as to whether or not Thanos is actually an upgrade to this list, because you are giving up meaningful things. It is actually something that legitimately hurts you as you give it up, and that is definitely not something that Thanos is guaranteed to make up for on his own. Obviously, it is good to put Thanos in a Batrock deck. How is that possibly going to be bad? But the question is if it's better than what you're giving up to do it, and you are meaningfully making sacrifices. If you hate playing against Thanos, the best place for you to start is a magic deck that just combos over the top of him. There's really a couple options in the game right now. I think that Scorpion is pretty clearly the strongest of those options. It is the magic deck that does the most dumb stuff. And I think that it's a really powerful deck that gets way, way better when you know what your opponents are doing, because your game plan is so immensely over the top of everything you're going to be playing that what your opponent is doing matters a ton, because the only way they're going to stop you is by preventing your game plan from happening in the first place. People do not beat this deck on points. It just doesn't happen. You beat this deck with Luke Cage. You beat this deck by turning off the limbo. You beat this deck by preventing them from cheating a bunch of energy sometimes. You beat this deck by Cosmoing the lane that has the Ancient One skill in it. But if you know that your opponent is going to try to beat you by doing stuff like that, what you can do is like Mystique. Instead of going for the Ancient One stuff, you can Mystique a Scorpion and then do the Ancient One stuff in a different lane. Like that kind of stuff, that kind of contextual knowledge of like, what would my opponent be doing? What do they think I'm about to do? And then what does that mean for what they're about to do? That's where the ceiling of this deck is, honestly. Like, this is a deck that like, you do not need to do your entire full combo to beat people. You can just get a couple Scorpions, and that's usually going to be good enough. Extremely, extremely similar concept here. The Nimrod deck is very, very, very good. It is a magic deck, and I don't know if I've talked a little bit about why magic is so good against Thanos decks. The biggest thing is that all of these Thanos decks are built to play Thanos on 5 and do something stupid on turn 6. Whether that's just like, oh, all my cards got discounted, you know, here's my stuff. Very few of them are actually doing something with a turn 7. A lot of them have the board filled up in ways like that. You get a bunch of discounts. You really get to just spam out your hand. You're playing everything on curve. Your curve is low to facilitate Thanos in the first place. So you don't even necessarily have energy. Like, you get 7 energy on turn 7. These are decks that are never using that 7 energy. Like, a lot of the Thanos decks just don't have the ability to use that 7 energy. They're just not in that business, right? And that means that just baseline, anything that is making better use of that tends to have a really good time playing against Thanos decks. And so you just do stuff, right? Again, the only real question for you here is, what are they going to do to try to stop you? Are they playing Juggernaut? Are they playing Cosmo? How are they preventing you from doing this? Do they have the Soul Stone? Are they going to blow up your Spider-Man? And if so, does that mean you need to play Shuri instead? Spoiler alert. Yes, it does. But like, that kind of stuff is like, this this is how you beat those guys. You make there be an extra turn in the game, you use it better than them, and even when there isn't an extra turn in the game, you might just be able to combo over the top of them unless they're interacting with you. Cards like Cosmo and Juggernaut are really good for this reason in those mid-range decks, and what you'll notice about all of those Thanos lists is they are skimping on interaction. They are keeping the curve low because those are bad cards to just run out there when they're Thanosing. That is where you target them. Another version of this concept, and frankly, probably the worst one, is Zombie Galacti. Zombie Galacti is a very okay Magic deck right now. The big issue you have is other Magic decks kind of do more points than you. And with the metagame sort of solidifying into like, there's a couple good Thanos decks, Batroc is still really good, and then it's just combo decks beating the Thanos decks, right? Those combo decks probably also beat you. I don't know what the hell Zombie Galacti is supposed to do about a Scorpion in a million years. They're going to make 5 Scorpions. Your Zombie Galactis are going to become 19 power, and then you're going to have negative 150 power on the board. And there's nothing you can do about that. That just happens every time you play the matchup unless they totally brick, which is not an actual win con because as many times as they're going to totally brick, you could also totally brick. In fact, they're better at getting the one card that is in their deck than you are because they play Blink and you don't. So both of you are decks that are down to one card. They brick less than you and they win the heads up. It's tough. Everyone just decided to stop playing this deck for literally no reason. And I think that if you're looking for a deck that isn't a Thanos deck and isn't one of the hyperscaler Magic combo decks and also isn't Batroc, there's no reason to look further than this. This is just absolutely still an elite deck. There is no question in my mind that this is still going to put people in the trash can. It is extremely strong. It is able to output all sorts of points. It is able to move its stuff around, redistribute those points. And as long as you spend the game thinking about what to do about a Thanos, you are going to be okay in that matchup. They're going to beat you some of the time if you blow it, but you've got a lot of small cards to put in lanes to make sure that Soulstone isn't beating your ass. And if Soulstone isn't beating your ass, you are beating their ass. They are not playing Stardust. Nobody is doing that right now. You are going to put the beat down on them. Supergiant's in a bit of an odd spot. I think people seem to think that it beats Thanos. I don't think it beats the good Thanos decks. I think that it is plausible for it to beat Wiccan Thanos. I buy that because I don't have a lot of respect for Wiccan Thanos. I don't think it beats the Thanos deck that's playing like Shadowlands, Daredevil, and Wilson Fisk. I don't think it beats the Thanos deck, even the one that's playing Aurora. And I definitely don't think it beats Batroc. So what are we gonna be beating here? Like, I think this might be a case of people getting a little overly literal. Oh, Thanos comes down on turn 5. I'm gonna play a Supergiant to beat it. And it's like, I don't think it's bad. Just the actual lesson is Thanos comes down on turn 5. I'm gonna play a Magic to beat it, right? Like that's the real direction you want to go. Whereas like, this is good stats, and I have a ton of respect for it, and it's probably still totally fine into a bunch of stuff. It's meaningfully disruptive. I don't want to talk down on Supergiant. It won the last 2 Golden Gauntlets for a reason. There's a ton of play in a deck like this. It's a solid stats deck. But I kind of think people might be tunnel visioning on, if they can't reveal Thanos, I win. And that's not true, because the good Thanos decks are playing a bunch of other good cards too. I've seen a decent amount of people playing Sarah Surfer stuff, which I think is largely an interesting space to be in, but not one I'm super compelled by right now, largely because it kind of gets mogged by the other deck doing Luna Snow, Psylocke, Sarah Blink. You and, of course, the Scorpion deck are kind of the same deck. Like, that's where the core of what you're doing is. It's Luna Snow, new Psylocke, accelerate into turn 4 Sarah, do something stupid. I think it's better to be a Magic deck right now. That's not a permanent state of affairs, but it is what I think right now. And I think it's probably just better to be a Scorpion deck than it is to do this, because at least that deck you have very clear understanding of, if I do what I'm going to do, I'm going to win. Whereas this deck, I don't have nearly that clear of a level of understanding because there are still going to be games where you just get outpointed by the Thanos decks, right? Like I play against this deck a decent amount of time. You know, they get the turn 4 thing. It's cool. All right, awesome. If I have priority and you got a turn 4 Sarah and you play that in an empty lane and I have the orange stone, she goes away. Like it's not a thing that's always going to happen, but it is a kind of thing you need to be concerned about. And then where are my points coming from? Venus needs to get down there, right? But also what needs to get down there is Storm Horseman. You got to make sure she's getting out there, because if you're not doing that, where are your points coming from? It's not incredibly clear to me that this deck is doing enough points to justify the combo thing that it's doing with its 3s and its 5s. I think that it is a totally acceptable deck, and I really do like that it has Shadow King, but I do worry about long-term planning here. I want to talk a little bit about the list Shuri Enjoyer has been playing in High Infinite recently. Shuri Enjoyer is a very good player who, if I'm not mistaken, does not own Thanos, and I think that's probably going to be a topic of conversation here. Wanted to highlight this because he was beating my butt with this, and I think that is a really solid thing to be doing. I mean, Venus Bishop is actually like you don't expect to be as impressed by it as you are, right? But this deck got a really big boost with the nerf to Mother Ascani, because the biggest thing that made this deck suck is that when Mother Ascani was around, people were copying Gambits, and you can't beat people who are copying Gambits. But right now, V-Hand, Gambit generally, Mother Ascani, all of those things are taking a huge backseat to Thanos. And Thanos doesn't really make a ton of sense in that deck, so people aren't really doing it. Now, I also think that the deck is sort of bad outside of that, but it's given this kind of archetype new life because nobody is actually trying to deal with the things that this deck is doing. Everyone is trying to deal with other stuff right now. And that means that you can just actually win games with some meaningful interactive pieces. This deck is not far off Batroc. I'm not saying it is Batroc or anything like that, but it's not far off. Like, there are legitimately going to be games where you have enough points or as many points as the Batroc deck. You have your little Cosmo. If you don't like the Shang-Chi, you can replace it with Juggernaut. You can do the same damn thing you're doing. There is a lot to be said for a shell like this. Like, it is kind of a Venus merchant, but being a Venus merchant became a way better thing to do when people stopped playing 4 Gambits a game. It's a little bit tough to talk about a metagame like this because metagames are shaped not just by what is good, but by what people perceive to be good. And I think that right now people are very stuck on this card, which is not to say they shouldn't be. This is probably the coolest card Marvel Snap has ever made. It's really good. And those two things go together to give it a play rate that is genuinely kind of incredibly large. I don't want to sit here and act like this card might not be a balance issue. I think it is very plausible that this card ends up being a balance issue. If you told me that they had to nerf this card by 2 points of power 4 weeks from now, I'd be like, yeah, okay, I can totally see that. But I also think that the metagame is largely full of people who don't want to move on. Normally, metagames start cycling when people get sick of a card like this and start playing the things that beat it, which we've talked about plenty of those in this video. And they do beat it. But people don't want to stop playing the fun card. And so it's almost like there's kind of a gentleman's agreement, because this card, to be clear, also is good enough to still be great. Like, this is a great card. This is a top 4 card that Marvel Snap has made this year, and the 3 cards above it got nerfed. This is a card that absolutely belongs in the conversation with Mother Ascani, Shou Lao, and Star-Lord. I think it's below all of them, but it definitely is a card that is in that conversation. It is a Mount Rushmore of this year kind of card. But beyond that, it's also cooler than all of them. And so that means that people are just sort of kind of agreeing to just keep playing Thanos. And you're just Thanosing and Thanosing and Thanosing and Thanosing and Thanosing. And he fires at the beginning of every game. And so every time you're like, oh, another Thanos. And it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, that does make sense. I could see why people are getting annoyed by this. But I'm not convinced that his play rate is justified by his win rate. I'm not saying that I guarantee that it isn't. But I'm not convinced that it is. And I'm not necessarily convinced that this isn't to some degree a bit of shiny new toy syndrome. And so, obviously, wait and see how things happen. I do think this card is a top 4 card released in Marvel Snap this year, and the other 3 in that group got nerfed. I do think it is entirely possible that this is a card that will need to get nerfed. But I also think that he's so damn cool and so damn exciting that his play rate is being significantly boosted by the fact that he just rocks, and that trying to beat him isn't nearly as fun as playing him. All right, y'all. This one might be a controversial one. Please try to be nice to people in the comments. I've definitely noticed a bit of an uptick of people talking about like someone will say something and then people will just someone will disagree with me and then people will like pile on that person. And I really would like that to not happen. Like if you see someone being confrontational with me, it's okay. You can move past it. If I want to engage, I will, but I definitely don't want you guys to go attack that person. I've seen that happen a couple times recently, and I just wanted to say explicitly, please don't do that. All right, y'all. I've been KMBest. You've been phenomenal. Remember to be nice in these comments, and I will see you in the next one.